So over the weekend, Trump just ignored a federal judge's order to turn planes around and bring back Venezuelan immigrants. He is stating that he has the authority to deport basically anyone he wants to under the Alien Enemies Act of 1789, and just saying the judge, nope, you ordered it too late. The planes are already over international waters, so you have no jurisdiction. To me, this seems like a real constitutional crisis. I don't know if either your or my lifetime we've had a president just ignore a court order. I mean, from my understanding is that they literally went into a recess with the judge to determine if any outgoing flights were happening at that moment, and there were, and they didn't tell them to turn around and come back with those immigrants. Now, the Trump administration is claiming that these were a bunch of drug dealers, gang members, et cetera. And the judge is like, well, hang on, but your justification for deportation here is an 1789 law that basically says that it basically has to be invoked during wartime. We're not at war. So this authority that you're claiming to have to do these actions isn't valid, or at least he hints that there's a strong case that it is invalid because he issued a temporary restraining order against it. And the Trump administration essentially, like I said, just ignored the order, continued the flights on, and then we get this crazy, like, boy, it looks just modern propaganda straight out of North Korea looking video where they're hauling people off of these planes, they're shoving them into prisons. I mean, my goodness, if you want to, I thought it was from a movie. Like, they filmed it as if it was from a movie, and it was just pure propaganda to show that they're doing something. I guess I don't know. I was kind of taken back by just how straight out of V for Vendetta it all looked. I don't know if you had the same feelings that I did, but I was kind of shocked by that something like that would, filmed like that in America, a propaganda piece that blatant, would just be put out there, and you would have so many people just cheering it on. I don't understand it. That does not appeal to me. But I am certainly not Trump's ideal audience for this. Where do we go from here? It seems like, okay, if Trump is openly defying a court order, and we've had conflicting statements, right, where the Trump administration has said, oh, we weren't defying the court order. Oh, the planes were over international waters, so the court order didn't apply. And I'm certainly no legal expert when it comes to international waters, but it sure seems to me if the plane is a U.S. plane being manned by U.S. military, that a court order should still apply regardless of where in the world it is. That seems like the facts of the matter to me. I don't know the specifics of that situation, but it seems to me that Trump is specifically using this circumstance to invoke this act, not because he's trying to get rid of gang members, but because he's trying to get rid of anyone he wants to. Because if you want to get rid of gang members, well, you can charge them with crimes and deport them that way. But this sure seems like straight out of a dystopian novel where he's just grabbing on power to issue edicts and deport anyone he wants to.
Yeah, we're certainly through the looking glass, John. You raise a lot there. You raise a lot. I think, firstly, to address the point of like the extent to which we are now in a constitutional crisis, I think we're right now at a point where the administration is pretty much relying on tyranny through technicality. There is not an open defiance. They're certainly laying the groundwork for open defiance. They're laying the groundwork for delegitimizing the judiciary as a branch of government. They're certainly saying a lot of things that if judges don't rule the way that they like, then those judges are themselves somehow violative of the law. But right now, we're not at a point where the admin is taking on the legitimacy of the judiciary directly. They're just sort of ignoring orders, pretending they hadn't ignored orders, pretending they had an argument for why they couldn't possibly have complied with an order, and oopsie doopsie, it took us so long to deliver that argument that now there's a new reason we can't comply with the order. They're on this sort of technicality treadmill of trying to exhaust, any sort of pretense of credibility. while also very obviously to any outside observer not abiding by the rulings of the court, not abiding by the TROs that have been issued, not abiding by injunctions, and just continuing to ship people out of the country, not to deport them, keep in mind, but to a prison in a country outside of their country of origin, to just an overseas, black box of a prison. Uh, it's troubling. It should be troubling. I mean, we should all be up in arms about it. I think having the technicality argument is probably the wrong argument to have in the face of everything else. Now, the other big element that you touched on, and I think this has me more floored than anything, the reliance on the Alien Enemies Act. We grew up learning in school. I mean, everybody, there was a time, had a civics course in high school or junior high school where you learn about the Alien and Sedition Acts as this black stain on the early American Republic, this time where the founding fathers allow the most base impulses of their human instinct, of their fears and of their anxieties and of their cruelty to hold sway over the lofty ideals that the American experiment was founded on, the ideals that they fought a revolution for. The Alien and Sedition Acts are seen as a betrayal of those ideas, are taught to generations of people as a betrayal of those ideas. I can't imagine how half of the country right now is just saying, oh yeah, the Alien Enemies Act, which by the way was not this early sin of American history, but was invoked most recently to inter Japanese Americans during the Second World War, which is another of the tremendously shameful chapters in American history. And to say, oh, clearly this is appropriate justification for these actions. It's insane. It would be like citing slavery as a precedent for the powers of the presidency. These are things that America is ashamed and embarrassed of, not things that provide a foundation where anybody could pretend to be building some kind of just and justified policy. I'm at a loss, John.
It reminds me a lot of the Mahmoud Khalil situation in the Columbia University, where they are not making an argument to deport him based on that he actually supported terrorism, or that he provided material support to terrorism, or that he stopped classes, he trespassed, or any of these things that those protesters did that I agree they should be arrested for. They should be charged with any crimes that they committed, any harassment that they did. They should be charged with those crimes, and if they're convicted, they may potential deportation in those situations. But they're saying, no, we're not going to go that route. We're just going to say we're going to deport you just for what you said. And that's what's really troubling to me about this situation and about that one, is that they're specifically trying to undermine the law in a way that they can apply it in whatever way they want to. Because here's the thing, and I tried to explain this to my brother-in-law who's a pastor. I was like, listen, if you're saying that the president can determine that any group, because it's the president who makes the call on what groups are terrorist groups, right? If you're saying that the president can strip rights from people just based on making a decision only the executive branch makes, right? The executive branch determines who is and who isn't a terrorist group. They have that power to do that. They can say, oh, pro-life groups, they blew up this abortion clinic, therefore all of them are terrorist groups. Or you start to see how big this net can go and how this can be used against you. I always tell people, never give government more power than you would give your worst enemy, because someday they might get elected, right? And we have a constitution to prevent those people, when elected, from encroaching on your rights. This was intentionally designed to restrict the government, to prevent it from infringing on those rights. And he's creating these legal justifications specifically to weaken your rights and say, oh, it's just about immigrants. Oh, it's just about illegal immigrants. Well, no, he's going after legal immigrants as well. Quite a lot of them, actually. We see story after story coming in about somebody who has a legal residency who was kept out of the United States, or like we heard about a German immigrant who had legal green card. He came into the United States and was basically damn near tortured, or at least assaulted by immigration authorities just on his way into the country. I mean, he was stripped naked, washed in a cold shower, wasn't given his meds, had medical problems because of it. I mean, and these stories are only growing. For example, there was an American Pie actress who was trying to come in from the southern border, and she explained everything. She was truthful to them, and she tried to come into the country, and they have arrested her and put her into a private prison, and she's sitting there right now. And it's just these horrific stories. You wonder if people are going to wake up, and we're going to start to see some pushback. We've started to see some of this pushback over the Columbia University situation, but as these stories start to pile up, and the more and more innocent people start to get pulled into these facilities, and these legal nightmares that we're starting to see. I hope people start to wake up. I hope we start to have more protests because, man, you say it's just for illegal immigrants. Well, then they say it's actually for illegal immigrants. And that's at what point, I've even seen some people talking about, oh, well, we should go after dual citizenship and other people with dual citizenship, and they should have less rights. And it's like when you start expanding those violations, it doesn't just limit itself to the initial group that they're targeting. The Nazi government in Germany didn't just go after, didn't go after all the people that they wanted to go after at the beginning. Right? They started small, they focused on groups, and they expanded who they were targeting over time. It wasn't all at once, it was over time. They slowly built up the enemies of the state, if you will. And we see Trump echoing those exact things, and it's kind of horrifying that it's happening here. I said the other day that I never quite understood how so many people just ignored and stood by and watched the Nazi government do what it did. And boy, I kind of see it now because people are looking at it going, oh, I believe these justifications, and they don't see that no, these justifications will be used against you eventually. It's quite frustrating that you want to wake up, please wake up. But it's quite fascinating to kind of watch it firsthand. There's a morbid curiosity to me that kind of looking at this from historical lens going, okay, I see how these evil movements get started and continue to go because people are just standing on the sidelines going, oh, it'll be okay. It will never be used against me.
Well, you're touching on the really insidious second order effect of things like this, which is that MAGA's adherents and defenders now need to continually justify on thinner and thinner grounds greater and greater inhuman acts. And every little bit further someone goes down that road, they get further and further away from being able to see a way out of it. That sunk cost fallacy builds to get to a point where you have a red line where finally you admit, oh no, I didn't think it would be like this. This far is too far. That gets harder and harder to reach the further you can drag supporters down this chain of indignities. And somehow pretending that the president of the pretending that the country is currently in a state of war, right? Which either is a state of armed conflict between two national entities, or is a term so meaningless it means whatever the president wants it to mean. And to pretend that one of those two things is reality, and then to further than rely on the horrendous Alien Enemies Act as though that somehow cloaks you in anything other than ignominy, right? That to pretend that lends any legitimacy to actions evoking it in light of American history and how that was adopted and how it has been used. And then finally to see things, to see people, to see legal residents of this country, people who are here on visas, people who have a right to be here, who've been granted a right to be here, shackled and chained and frog marched onto a plane to be shipped to an overseas prison. To defend all of those things is an effort in some sense to push supporters of MAGA so far away from any connection to fundamental humanity that they become unrecoverable. And when a significant portion of the population finds itself in that position, finds itself in the position of being so pot committed, to use a poker term, to being so bought in it becomes a real problem for everybody. Because how then do you reach those people?
I know you and I both share an interest in pulling people out of cults and how to talk to people who are in cults. And I've found, and I'm sure you have too, that you have to talk to people and you have to get them to justify their own actions, because you'll never talk anybody out of a cult. You have to get them to think their way out. You have to get them to question the things that are going on in their head. And I think that it's going to be a long time, and it's going to be a struggle, because ultimately they have the advantage. Their ideology can be spread through misinformation and lies, and online very easily can be spread that way. And whereas to pull people out of that type of mentality, a lot of times it has to be a one-on-one conversation to get people to think about what they're saying, and what they believe and why they believe it, to get them to question it. I worry about the next decade, but it also brings up an interesting challenge that we'll see how it plays out, because and it's important. I think we've got I think I hate it when people say this, but I'm going to say it. Our country is literally at stake here.
Yeah, well, and I will say, John, because you mentioned that shared interest of ours, and it is one that we have, and how people become engrossed in, and how some people are able to come out of cults. If you are listening to this and somebody that you're personally connected with, somebody that you love, somebody who you are close to, a dear friend, a family member, someone you have that relationship with, is going so far down this road that you see them losing their own humanity. You see them, reposting the deportation ASMR videos. You see them reveling in the cruelty of the Trump cult. Uh, Connect them with compassion, connect them back to the person they were before they found themselves in that place. It's one of the most effective things that can be done. You can't do it with a total stranger online. You can't do it as a keyboard warrior on X, unfortunately, or else we would be mass deprogramming people as we speak. But if you have somebody that you have that personal connection to, remind them that they used to be a human being before they went deep down that path, and connect them back to that time that you knew each other in a better place. That might give them a lifeline to come out. Not guaranteed to, but it might.